The desert sun hadn't yet cleared the mountains when Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves first saw her name on the assignment roster. Captain Elena Vasquez, new lead instructor for Advanced Combat Readiness Training. He remembers standing in the operations office, coffee going cold in his hand, staring at that piece of paper like it might change if he looked long enough. 23 years he'd been at Fort Donovan. 23 years of watching instructors come and go, most of them good, some of them great. But this was different. This was the first time command had assigned a woman to lead the crucible. The crucible wasn't just another training course. It was where they sent the ones who thought they'd seen everything. The ones who needed to be broken down and rebuilt before they could lead others into the kind of places where maps end and mercy doesn't follow. 6 weeks of physical punishment, psychological warfare, and scenarios designed to strip away everything but character. The washout rate hovered around 40%. The instructors who ran it were legends. Hard men with harder reputations, most of them carrying scars from places the news had stopped covering years ago. Marcus had served under 3 of them. He'd become one himself, and now command was handing the program to someone none of them had ever heard of. The rumors started before she even arrived. She was a political appointment, someone said, a diversity hire to satisfy some general's mandate. She'd never seen combat, another insisted. She was fresh from a desk job at the Pentagon, pushing paper while they'd been pushing through Helmand Province and Ramadi, and a dozen other hellholes that bled into one another until all you remembered was the dust and the names of the ones who didn't make it home. Marcus didn't participate in the speculation. He'd learned a long time ago that rumors were just fear wearing a different face. But he didn't stop them either. He told himself he was waiting to see, reserving judgment, giving her a fair chance. Looking back now, he knows that was a lie. He'd already decided. They all had. She arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, when the heat still climbed past 100 by noon. Marcus was running the obstacle course qualification, watching a group of fresh candidates struggle through the rope climb, when he saw a figure walking across the training yard toward the command building. Small frame, maybe 5'5", dark hair pulled back tight. She moved with purpose, but without hurry, carrying a single duffel bag over her shoulder. No entourage, no ceremony. Just a woman walking into the teeth of an institution that had already decided she didn't belong. He watched her disappear into the building and felt something twist in his gut. Not quite guilt, not quite shame. Something closer to premonition. The first staff meeting happened that afternoon. The instructors gathered in the briefing room, 12 men who'd collectively served over 2 centuries in uniform. They sat in their usual spots, the same territorial instincts that governed every military space. Marcus took his chair near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to maintain distance. The room smelled like coffee and leather, and the particular staleness that comes from too many bodies in too small a space talking about too serious things. She entered at 1400 hours exactly, not a minute early, not a second late. "Gentlemen," she said, and her voice carried despite its softness. "I'm Captain Vasquez. Some of you probably have questions. I'm going to answer the most important one first. Yes, I've been in combat, 3 tours, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. I've led soldiers in contact. I've pulled wounded men out of burning vehicles. I've written letters to mothers explaining why their sons aren't coming home. I've earned every scar on my record and every gray hair that's starting to show. And I'm here because I'm the best person for this job. Not because of my gender, not despite it. I'm here because when command looked at who could run this program, my name was at the top of the list." The silence that followed was dense enough to choke on. She didn't wait for a response. She moved to the head of the table, spread out a folder, and began outlining her vision for the training cycle. New scenarios, updated evaluation metrics, integration of lessons learned from recent operations. She spoke for 40 minutes without notes, citing regulation numbers and tactical precedents with the precision of someone who'd lived inside the doctrine until it became second nature. Marcus listened and felt his assumptions beginning to crack. Not break, not yet. Just crack. When she finished, she looked around the table. Questions? Staff Sergeant Tom Hendricks, a barrel-chested man who'd served in Fallujah and still walked with a limp from the IED that nearly took his leg, leaned forward. "Ma'am, with respect, the candidates in this program are going to test you. They're going to push boundaries. They're going to see a female instructor and assume weakness. How do you plan to handle that?" She met his eyes without flinching. "The same way I've handled it for 15 years, Sergeant. By being better, faster, smarter, tougher. I don't need them to respect me because I'm a woman. I need them to respect me because I can do things they can't. And by the end of week 1, they will." It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact delivered with the flat certainty of someone who'd proven it 1,000 times before. The meeting ended, the instructors filed out, conversations fragmenting into smaller groups as they processed what had just happened. Marcus hung back, watching her collect her materials. She moved with the economy of motion that comes from too many deployments, too many nights sleeping in full gear, too many moments where wasted movement meant wasted life. "Captain," he said. She looked up. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they carried the particular weight that comes from seeing things most people only have nightmares about. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, I've read your file. Impressive record. I'm looking forward to working with you." He nodded slowly. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always. This is going to be harder than you think. Not the training, not the candidates, the culture. There are people here who've already decided you're going to fail, who want you to fail, who are going to measure every decision you make against an impossible standard." She smiled, and there was no humor in it. "Staff Sergeant, I've been measured against impossible standards since the day I enlisted. I stopped caring about what people wanted a long time ago. I care about what works. I care about preparing these soldiers for the worst day of their lives, and I care about making sure that when that day comes, they're ready. Everything else is noise." She picked up her folder and walked past him, leaving him alone in the briefing room with the uncomfortable realization that he might have misjudged her, that they all might have. The first training cycle began the following Monday. 42 candidates, all of them volunteers, all of them already qualified in their specialties: infantry, artillery, combat engineers. They came from different units, different backgrounds, different wars. What they had in common was ambition and the belief that they could handle whatever the crucible threw at them. Captain Vasquez assembled them in the training yard at 0500 hours. Dawn was still an hour away. The desert cold cut through their physical training uniforms. She stood on a platform in front of them, backlit by spotlights that turned her into a silhouette. "You're here because you think you're ready to lead," she said, her voice amplified just enough to carry across the formation. "You're wrong. Leadership isn't something you're born with. It's not something you earn through time in service or rank on your collar. Leadership is what happens when everything you thought you knew stops working and you still have to make decisions that keep people alive. That's what this training is designed to teach you, not tactics, not procedures. Character under pressure, the ability to function when functioning feels impossible." She paused, letting the words settle. "Some of you have already decided I don't belong here. You've looked at me and seen something that doesn't fit your picture of what an instructor should be. That's fine. I'm not here to fit your picture. I'm here to expand it. By the time we're done, you'll either understand that or you'll be gone." The first week was diagnostic. Physical assessments, psychological evaluations, team-building exercises designed to reveal how candidates performed under controlled stress. Marcus watched Captain Vasquez move through the training areas, observing, correcting, demonstrating when necessary. She ran the obstacle course herself on Day 2, completing it in a time that beat half the candidates and matched the standing instructor record. She didn't announce it, didn't celebrate, just finished, checked her stopwatch, and moved on to the next event. But the candidates noticed, and so did the instructors. The whispers changed, not gone, not yet, but different, less certain, more curious. On Day 4, during hand-to-hand combat qualifications, a candidate named Corporal Jake Morrison made a mistake. He was 6'3", 220, former college linebacker who'd deployed twice with the infantry. When Captain Vasquez demonstrated a defensive technique, he challenged her. "Ma'am, with respect, that move doesn't work against someone with a size advantage." She looked at him for a long moment. "You volunteering to help demonstrate, Corporal?" "Yes, ma'am." The other candidates formed a circle. Marcus felt the tension spike. This was a moment, the kind that defined how the rest of the cycle would go. Morrison wasn't being malicious. He was testing, pushing, doing what aggressive young soldiers do when they encounter something that challenges their understanding of how the world works. Captain Vasquez stepped into the center of the circle. Morrison joined her, and the size difference was stark. She looked small next to him, vulnerable. "Attack me," she said. "Full speed, full strength, don't hold back." Morrison hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't want to hurt." "That's not a concern, Corporal. Attack me." He came at her, fast, committed. Exactly the kind of aggressive assault that would overwhelm most opponents through sheer force. She moved like water, redirected his momentum, used his size against him. 3 seconds later, Morrison was face down in the dirt with his arm locked behind his back at an angle that made Marcus wince. "The move works," she said quietly, releasing him and helping him to his feet. Because it's not about strength, it's about leverage, timing, and understanding that every advantage can become a liability if you know where to apply pressure. Size makes you powerful, but it also makes you predictable. Speed and technique beat power when power doesn't know what it's facing. Morrison rubbed his shoulder, nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. She turned to address the formation. Any of you who think you can't learn from someone smaller, weaker, or different than you have already failed the most important test. Humility isn't weakness, it's the foundation of growth. Check your ego at the gate or pack your bags. I don't have time to train people who can't be taught. The second week was where the real work began. Sleep deprivation, constant physical stress, scenarios that required split-second decisions with incomplete information and consequences that felt real even though they weren't. Captain Vasquez was everywhere, in the field, in the barracks, in the debriefs that sometimes went past midnight as she broke down every decision, every hesitation, every moment of doubt. Marcus watched her push herself as hard as she pushed the candidates. Harder. She ate the same meals, kept the same hours, ran every scenario herself before making the candidates attempt it. There was no separation between her standards and her performance. She demanded excellence and demonstrated it in every action. The instructors started coming around, slowly, grudgingly, but they came around. Hendricks was first. He pulled Marcus aside after a particularly brutal navigation exercise. She's good, he said, and it cost him something to admit it. Better than good. She sees things, anticipates problems before they develop, knows how to push people right to their breaking point and then pull them back before they shatter. That's instinct. Can't teach that. Marcus nodded. He'd seen it too. The way she read body language. The way she knew when a candidate needed encouragement and when they needed a harder push. The way she balanced individual development with team cohesion. It was the kind of skill that came from years of actual leadership, the kind you couldn't fake or learn from a manual. By the end of week 3, the washout rate was lower than it had been in 5 cycles. Not because the training was easier, it wasn't. If anything, Captain Vasquez had made it harder, but she'd also made it smarter. She'd identified weaknesses earlier, provided targeted correction, created an environment where failure was treated as information instead of condemnation. The candidates were performing better because they understood what was expected and believed they could achieve it. The turning point came during week 4, a live fire exercise in the urban combat facility. Multiple teams moving through a mock village, engaging targets, evacuating wounded, making tactical decisions in real time. Captain Vasquez was running oversight from the control tower, monitoring radio traffic, tracking performance metrics, ready to halt the exercise if anything went wrong. Something went wrong. One of the candidates, a young lieutenant named Sarah Chen, took a hard fall clearing a wall. Compound fracture, bone visible through torn fabric. She was screaming into her radio, trying to maintain composure, but losing the fight against shock and pain. Captain Vasquez didn't hesitate. She was out of the tower and moving before Marcus could process what was happening. She hit the training floor running, covered 200 meters in what felt like seconds, reached Chen's position while the rest of the team was still trying to figure out what to do. Marcus watched from the observation post as she took control, calm voice, clear orders. She stabilized the injury, established communications, coordinated with medical, and kept Chen conscious and focused while they waited for the evacuation team. But she didn't stop the exercise. She integrated Chen's injury into the scenario, turned it into a learning moment, made the other candidates work through the chaos of a teammate going down, while maintaining their mission focus. It was masterful. Not just the tactical execution, but the teaching. The way she balanced care for an injured soldier with the reality that in combat, the mission continues even when people get hurt. That hard truth that every leader eventually faces. Chen was medevaced to the base hospital. The exercise continued, and when it finished 2 hours later, Captain Vasquez gathered the candidates for the debrief. She was covered in dirt and blood, exhausted, but her voice never wavered. "Lieutenant Chen is going to be fine," she said. "Broken tibia, 6 weeks recovery, she'll be back. What she won't get is a second chance at this training cycle. She's out. Not because she failed, because sometimes circumstances make decisions for us. That's the reality we train for. Bad things happen to good people. Equipment fails. Plans fall apart. People get hurt. And when that happens, the rest of you have to keep moving, keep thinking, keep leading, because the soldiers depending on you don't stop needing leadership when things go wrong. That's when they need it most." She paused, looking at each of them. "Today you saw how to handle a casualty in a tactical environment. But more importantly, you saw that I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. When someone on my watch gets hurt, I'm there. First, fastest. That's the standard. That's what leadership looks like. Not from the rear, not from a safe distance, from the front, in the mud, bleeding if that's what it takes. The silence that followed was different from the silence in that first staff meeting. This wasn't uncertainty. This was respect, hard-earned, honestly given. Marcus found her later that evening in her office. She was working through after-action reports, still in her field uniform, still covered in the evidence of what had happened. "You should clean up, ma'am," he said from the doorway. She looked up, smiled tiredly. "Probably can't seem to make myself move." "That was impressive today. The way you handled Chen, the way you kept the exercise going. A lot of instructors would have shut it down, played it safe." "Safe doesn't teach anything, Staff Sergeant. Chen knew the risks. They all do. My job isn't to protect them from every possible danger. It's to prepare them for danger they can't avoid. If we stop every time something goes wrong, we're teaching them that the appropriate response to adversity is to quit. That's the opposite of what they need to learn." Marcus stepped into the office, closed the door behind him. "I owe you an apology, ma'am." She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For doubting you, for assuming you weren't qualified, for thinking your gender meant you couldn't do this job. I was wrong. We were all wrong. And I'm sorry." She set down her pen, leaned back in her chair. "Staff Sergeant, I've been doubted my entire career. By men who looked at me and saw something that didn't fit their narrative of what a soldier should be. I stopped waiting for apologies a long time ago. What I care about is whether you can work with me, whether you can set aside whatever biases you brought to this assignment and focus on the mission. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am, already am." "Good, because I need you, all of you. I can't run this program alone. I need instructors who believe in what we're doing, who trust my judgment even when it makes them uncomfortable, who are willing to admit when they're wrong and adapt when circumstances change. That's leadership too, not just for the candidates, for us." She stood up, extended her hand. He shook it, felt the calluses that came from years of hard work, the firm grip that spoke to confidence without arrogance. "We're going to break some records this cycle," she said. "Not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because we're going to do this right, the way it should have been done all along." She was right. The 5th week brought the capstone exercise. 72 hours of continuous operations in the desert, multiple objectives, limited resources, maximum stress. It was designed to strip away everything but character, to reveal who could lead, when leading meant choosing between bad options and worse ones. Captain Vasquez pushed them harder than any previous cycle, extended the timeline, reduced the support, increased the complexity. The instructors expressed concern. She listened, then explained her reasoning with the kind of detailed tactical analysis that made it clear she'd thought through every variable. "They're ready," she said. "They're more ready than any group we've put through in the last 3 years. I've seen their performance metrics. I know what they can handle. And what they can't handle yet is what we're going to teach them in the next 72 hours. She was in the field with them, moving between positions, observing without interfering, present but not intrusive. Marcus shadowed her for part of the exercise, watching her watch the candidates, the way she read situations, the way she knew when to let them struggle and when to provide guidance. It was like watching someone play an instrument they had mastered so completely that technique became invisible and all that remained was art. On the final night, when the candidates were running on fumes and willpower, when every decision felt impossible and every step forward required effort that seemed beyond human capacity, Captain Vasquez gathered them at the final objective point. "This is where most cycles end," she said. "With me telling you you're done, you made it, you survived, but I'm not going to do that, because survival isn't the goal, excellence is. You came here to become better leaders. That doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in moments like this, when you're exhausted, when you're hurting, when every part of you wants to quit. This is when character shows itself. This is when you discover what you're actually made of." She looked at them. These soldiers who'd pushed themselves beyond what they thought possible. "So, I'm giving you a choice. You can be done right now. Nobody will judge you. You've earned your qualification, or you can keep going. One more scenario. One more test. One more chance to prove to yourself that your limits aren't where you thought they were. What's it going to be?" Every single candidate stayed, not because they wanted to, but because she'd shown them what it meant to lead from the front, to demand excellence by demonstrating it, to push past comfortable into the territory where growth actually happens. They completed the final scenario. 42 started, 37 finished, a 78% completion rate, the highest in the program's history. The final day brought the graduation ceremony. Base command attended, families arrived, the training yard was transformed from a place of punishment into a place of recognition. Captain Vasquez stood at attention as the base commander presented the results, praised the candidates, acknowledged the instructors. But when he called her forward to receive recognition for her leadership, something unexpected happened. The candidates started applauding, then the instructors joined, then everyone in attendance. Not polite ceremony applause, real recognition, the kind that comes from witnessing something extraordinary. She accepted the commendation with the same quiet dignity she'd brought to everything else. No speeches, no grand gestures, just a simple salute and a return to her position. Later, after the ceremony ended and the families dispersed and the training yard returned to its usual state, Marcus found her standing alone near the obstacle course. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of amber and crimson. "Records," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Highest completion rate, best performance metrics, fastest average course times. You didn't just meet the standard, ma'am. You redefined it." She shook her head. "The candidates did that. I just showed them what was possible." That's what leadership is, isn't it? Showing people what's possible. Making them believe they can achieve things they thought were beyond them. You did that. Not just for them. For us, too. She turned to look at him, and in the fading light, he could see the fatigue that she'd been carrying for 6 weeks. The weight of proving herself. The burden of being measured against impossible standards. The cost of being first. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" she asked quietly. "Not the training, not the candidates, not even the doubters. It was knowing that if I failed, it wouldn't just be my failure. It would be proof of every stereotype, evidence for every person who ever said women couldn't do this. That pressure, that responsibility. That's what kept me up at night." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's not fair." "No, but it's real, and it's what every woman in uniform carries. We're not just representing ourselves, we're representing possibility. We're proving that capability doesn't have a gender, that excellence is about character and competence, not about fitting someone's narrow definition of what a soldier should look like." She paused, looking out across the training yard where 42 candidates had pushed themselves beyond their limits. "But you know what? I'm tired of proving it. I'm tired of having to be twice as good to be considered half as qualified. I'm tired of breaking records just to be taken seriously. I want to live in a world where my gender is the least interesting thing about me, where we judge people by their actions, their leadership, their ability to inspire others to be better than they thought they could be." "Maybe that starts here," Marcus said. "Maybe these candidates will remember what they learned, not just the tactics and techniques, but the lesson that their assumptions were wrong. That leadership can look different than they expected, that the best person for the job might surprise them." She smiled, and this time there was something like hope in it. "Maybe." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. "What's next for you?" he asked. "Command wants me to take this model to other training bases, standardize the improvements, train new instructors. Basically, do this over and over until it becomes normal instead of exceptional. You'll do it well." "I'll do it right," she corrected. "There's a difference." 3 months later, Marcus received his new assignment. He was being transferred to Fort Benning to help implement Captain Vasquez's training protocols across Ranger School. The memo included a personal note from her. It was brief, direct, carrying the same economy of language she brought to everything. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, they're sending me east to revolutionize infantry training. I requested you for my team. Command approved. Report in 30 days. We have work to do. Captain Vasquez." He read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer next to his other important documents. Letters from soldiers he'd served with, commendations, a photograph from his first deployment, the artifacts of a career built on doing hard things with good people. He thought about the first day he'd seen her name on the assignment roster, the assumptions he'd made, the doubts he'd carried, the moment when those doubts had started to crack and then finally shattered completely. There's a story they tell now at Fort Donovan about the cycle when everything changed, when a small woman with a quiet voice and an iron will took over the crucible and proved that courage doesn't look like anything except the willingness to stand in the fire and refuse to burn. The candidates from that cycle went on to lead soldiers in combat. They carried the lessons she taught them into places where those lessons saved lives. And when they trained the next generation, they remembered what excellence looked like, what leadership demanded, what it meant to push people not because you wanted to break them, but because you believed they could become something more than they thought possible. Records are just numbers until you understand what they represent. Captain Elena Vasquez's records represented more than faster times and higher completion rates. They represented the cost of being first, the burden of proof, the quiet courage it takes to walk into a room full of people who've already decided you don't belong, and force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew. She never called herself a pioneer, never claimed to be breaking barriers or making history. She just did the work, led from the front, demanded excellence by demonstrating it, showed an entire institution that their assumptions about capability were wrong, and their definition of leadership was too narrow. Years later, when reporters asked her about that first training cycle, she would smile and say the same thing she'd said to Marcus that evening on the training yard. The candidates did all the hard work. I just showed them what was possible. But everyone who was there knew the truth. She didn't just show them what was possible, she showed them what excellence looked like. And in doing so, she changed what an entire institution believed about who could lead and what leadership required. They say the best leaders are the ones who make you better just by being around them, who raise the standard not through words but through actions, who leave places better than they found them not because they demanded it, but because they inspired it. Captain Elena Vasquez was that kind of leader. The records she broke still stand, but her real legacy isn't in numbers. It's in the hundreds of soldiers she trained, the thousands she influenced, the institution she forced to evolve. It's in every person who now understands that capability isn't about fitting a mold, it's about breaking one. She proved it the only way it could be proven, not with rhetoric, not with politics, with excellence, with performance, with the kind of leadership that doesn't ask for respect, but earns it so completely that doubt becomes impossible. That's the story worth remembering. Not because it's about gender, but because it's about courage. The courage to be first. The courage to stand alone. The courage to prove that the only thing impossible is the limit we place on human potential. She showed them all what was possible. And in doing so, she expanded what an entire generation believed they could achieve. The desert sun sets over Fort Donovan every evening, painting the training yard in light that makes everything look softer than it is. But the course remains hard. The standards remain high. The crucible continues to test everyone who thinks they're ready to lead. And somewhere, another instructor is learning that the best way to honor a legacy is to build on it, to take what was proven and push it further, to understand that breaking records isn't the goal. Creating leaders is. Leaders who understand that strength comes in many forms, that excellence has no gender. That courage is what happens when you refuse to let other people's limitations define your possibilities. That's the lesson. That's the truth. That's what Elena Vasquez proved when she walked onto a military base that doubted her and left it changed forever. Not because she demanded they believe in her, but because she made belief inevitable.